Today's testimony follows a crazy day of twists and turns in Austin, and we could soon get to closing arguments. To break it all down, I want to bring in SMU political science professor Jillson. Good morning. Thanks for being back with us.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so let's talk about your thoughts on the trial so far and what you expect today.
Well, the first several days of presentation was by the House managers and their representatives, mostly Rusty Hardin, the lawyer from Houston, and their goal was to flesh out all of the charges that the House had made, provide evidence because the defense was saying there was no evidence for these charges, and so they made a good bit of headway. But now it is the defense's turn. Paxton's team is trying to chip away at some of the points that were earlier made by the prosecution, and they've made a little bit of headway today.
Well, that sounds like a good indication on their part that they've already made headway this morning. Any chance we're actually going to see Ken Paxton again?
Well, I think the 2 points where Paxton's team has made some progress is they presented evidence that some of the improvements made to Paxton's Austin home, particularly the granite countertops and cabinets, in fact, had not been made. And that was one of the things that has appeared in the press multiple times. And unless the prosecution can rebut that, I think that's progress for the defense. And then today, the idea has always been presented as Ken Paxton giving information to Nate Paul that he should not have had from other law enforcement agencies. They're working hard to poke holes in that today. And again, they've made some progress. But this is a multifaceted case as the prosecution presented it. The defense has pushed back on a couple points, but there's still a lot for the senators to mull over as they decide how to vote at the end of the day.
Now, do you think we'll see Ken Paxton again?
I don't expect to see Ken Paxton. It's possible that he shows up at the very end, but there's not much reason for him to do that. He wants to stay out of the cameras. What I think is going to happen is they're going to spend the rest of the day with the Paxton team trying to poke holes in the prosecution's argument. We may get to the closing statements today, but those may actually be tomorrow, so that then the senators could sort of conveniently around afternoon go into their secret session and begin making their final decisions.
Now, for folks who missed this yesterday, the House managers, again, acting as prosecutors, done with their case. Rusty Hardin resting yesterday, accidentally, though. Now, they were close on time, but can we talk about that moment and your thoughts?
Yeah, that was very interesting, and the newspapers have made a lot of that. I think it's a much smaller point. What happened is that the prosecution had their last witness up, and when they finished questioning that witness, Rusty Hardin said, "We rest our case," whereas the defense was supposed to get their cross-examination time. And then it's possible that Hardin might have wanted to ask some more questions of his own, but in fact, he had rested. So all that was really lost is the opportunity for the defense to question that witness, and they didn't seem like they really wanted to. So it was an interesting stumble, but I don't think it had much of a consequence.
All right, well, we appreciate that insight. You know, we haven't seen an impeachment trial in Texas in, a century. So does it feel like they've had to stop a lot, try to figure out some of the rules? Should those have been better defined before this all started?
Yeah, I think what has happened here is that you've got a presiding officer in Dan Patrick, the lieutenant governor, who, although he has some professional counselors close by, is not a lawyer, he's not a judge, he's never run anything like this. And so to ask him to make rules on evidence, for example, or the propriety of particular questions is asking a lot of him. And so he's had to slow down, and oftentimes they've had to huddle up and to discuss the merits of a particular objection. So it has gone a little slowly, but he's trying to be very careful to be sure that there's no appeal in this kind of a process, but to make sure that people don't have complaints about process at the end of this exercise.
All right, good point, Cal. Jillson, thanks again for joining us on Midday. We appreciate your insight and perspective.
Thank you.